She was enclosed in a mailbox and abandoned, as if she were nothing more than unwanted mail. It was 1:47 in the afternoon, with the Palm Desert sun beating down relentlessly. I pulled onto a dusty side road, a familiar part of my FedEx route I'd traveled 100 times. There was nothing remarkable about it, just a line of corroded mailboxes. Half were dented, and a few dangled from their hinges. On this day, however, something felt wrong. The moment I exited my truck, I noticed it, the faintest stir behind the mesh of one of the most ancient boxes. There was no sound, only a slight tremor, like a breath trapped within the metal. My scanner fell from my hand as I sprinted toward it. When I lifted the flap, a wave of heat billowed out, feeling like a blast furnace. Tucked inside, curled upon scraps of scorched paper, lay a tiny German Shepherd puppy. Her black and tan coat was matted with dust. She issued no bark, no whine. She simply gazed up at me, and her wide eyes held a look of profound, patient waiting, as if she had been anticipating someone for an eternity. I reached inside. Her body was limp, feverish, and dry as sand. Beneath her paw was a faded postcard, seemingly placed there deliberately. On its reverse, 5 words were scrawled in messy handwriting. "I hope she finds peace." That sentence pierced me. I enveloped her in the thin towel from my passenger seat and rushed back to my truck, my hands trembling. I poured water into a paper cup, letting a few drops fall onto her tongue. I could barely see her throat move. Setting the air conditioning to its maximum, I carefully placed her on my vest, directly on my lap. She remained silent, but her eyes were fixed on mine. Who would do such a thing to a puppy? To a German Shepherd puppy, no more than 4 months old, discarded in a rusted mailbox in the desert's heart. What kind of individual seals a life inside metal under 120-degree heat and simply drives off? I dialed the closest rescue center. The call went to voicemail. Another was full. "Leave your message due to high volume." I glanced down at her again. She blinked once, slowly. My job was no longer about delivering packages, not on that particular day. I pressed the accelerator and drove toward the only sliver of shade I knew on that route, the only sanctuary I could imagine at that moment. But as I drove, I could still feel it, the weight of her gaze, calm, steady, devoid of fear, simply waiting. And I couldn't shake the question of how long she had waited inside that box before I finally appeared. I drove up to the old citrus ranch near Mesa Verde Trail, the home of Mrs. Halbert, a longtime delivery recipient. The gate was ajar, so I drove right through and parked beneath the solitary pepper tree by the shed. I wasn't considering protocol. I just needed shade. And this German Shepherd puppy, this tiny, silent survivor, required immediate help. She was still completely quiet. Her breathing was shallow, her ribs rising and falling like dry leaves in a breeze. I poured more water into my cupped hand and let it dribble over her muzzle. She flinched but managed to swallow. "Ma'am," I called out, approaching the porch with the puppy swaddled in my vest. "It's Lucas from FedEx. I have an emergency." Mrs. Halbert emerged, wearing gardening gloves and an oversized sun hat. The moment she laid eyes on the puppy, her expression transformed. "Oh heavens," she breathed. "Bring her. Hurry." She guided me to the most shaded corner of the porch, retrieving an old dog bed and a bowl of cool water. We set the puppy down with care. She drank this time, a few sips, before letting her head fall flat onto the blanket. "She needs a vet," I stated. "She needs a miracle," Mrs. Halbert responded. I took out my phone and attempted to call every shelter within a 30-mile radius. The message was the same: overwhelmed, no room, no emergency services for puppies discovered in mailboxes. I looked at her again, those same eyes observing me. "I can't keep her," I said aloud, as if the words could absolve me. "I live in a studio. I'm on the road constantly. I hardly have time to sleep." She blinked slowly, then curled herself a little closer to the blanket. Her tail flickered, a mere half-inch movement, just once. Mrs. Halbert sat down next to me. "It appears she has already selected you, son." I almost scoffed. "I'm a mess." She shrugged. "Perhaps that is why she chose you." I sat there, observing her breathe, and felt something fundamental shifting within me. My thoughts returned to the mailbox and the postcard tucked beneath her paw, with its haunting message: "I hope she finds peace." "I'll call you Sonny," I said softly, "because you survived the sun." For the first time, Her ears twitched upward slightly, just enough to signal she had heard me. I remained with her for another 20 minutes, feeding her a small amount of mashed chicken from Mrs. Halbert's refrigerator, watching as life slowly seeped back into her, one cautious heartbeat at a time. Internally, however, a conflict was brewing. I couldn't keep her. I just couldn't. So why did the idea of relinquishing her feel more daunting than any challenge I had encountered in my military service? That night, sleep eluded me. Sunny lay curled in an old laundry basket by my bed, wrapped in a towel, her snoring so faint it was barely perceptible. Yet, I was attuned to every breath. I observed the rise and fall of her chest, as if it might cease if I looked away for too long. My mind kept drifting to Mara. She had been my unit's dog in Kandahar, another German shepherd. She had brown eyes, a sharp intellect, and was more courageous than most of the soldiers we served alongside. She had saved my life on one, perhaps two, occasions. I don't speak of her often. When the explosion occurred, she absorbed the shrapnel that was meant for me. I carried her back myself. I never forgot the weight of her body or the profound silence that followed. I had vowed never to form that kind of bond again, not with another dog, not after what happened. But Sunny had the same eyes. In the pre-dawn hours, I rose, went to the kitchen, and gazed at the refrigerator door. The postcard from the mailbox was there, held by a magnet I hadn't moved in years. I hope she finds peace. Peace. It was a peculiar wish for someone who had just left a puppy to perish inside a metal enclosure in the desert heat. Before sunrise, I was in my delivery van, rearranging boxes to create a space just large enough for the laundry basket. Sunny didn't stir as I lifted her inside. Just for today, I told myself, until I can devise a plan. We made a stop at a small pet store following my second delivery. I purchased puppy formula, a feeding bottle, 2 tins of wet food, a soft collar, and a name tag. The clerk smiled, asking if this was my first puppy. I nearly said no, but then I nodded. Her name's Sunny, I replied. By the time we were back on the route, Sunny was sitting up, weakly but with awareness. She observed the passing scenery through the window, as if it were her duty. Each time I reached over the seat to get a package, she would shift to watch my hand. At one point, I found myself smiling, not a polite, forced smile, but a genuine one, as if something within me was attempting to breathe again. Around midday, I made a delivery to an elderly woman on Silver Ridge. She opened her door, saw Sunny in the truck, and gasped. "She looks exactly like my daughter's old shepherd," she said, her voice unsteady. Before the accident, unsure how to respond, I just nodded. Sunny sat up a bit taller, as if sensing the moment. She wagged her tail once, just once, and the woman's hand flew to her mouth. She wiped at her eyes before shutting the door. Back in the van, I looked at Sunny. "You're not just an ordinary stray, are you?" I murmured. "You were part of someone's life. You were cherished." I despised that thought, because if she was loved, why did she end up in that mailbox? As evening approached, the sun began to dip behind the Santa Mountains. I spread a blanket out in my apartment and helped her get comfortable. She was gaining strength, eating and drinking, and even lifted her head when I whistled. But that night, before I shut my eyes, I whispered something I never thought I would say again. "Don't get attached, Lucas. You can't go through that again." She didn't reply, but she curled up beside my boots, and for the first time in years, I found myself hoping I wouldn't heed my own advice. The following morning, I was woken by a tearing sound. My initial thought was a break-in. Then I saw her, Sunny, half submerged in the remnants of my only pair of sneakers, her tail wagging as if she'd unearthed a great treasure. Fragments of shoelace clung to her nose, and she looked up at me with the most comically guilty and proud eyes I had ever witnessed. "Those were a limited edition," I grumbled. She replied with a bark, a tiny, hoarse sound, barely audible, yet it was the first vocalization she had made since I found her, and I couldn't stop myself. I laughed. It wasn't just a chuckle. It was a deep, full-bodied laugh that I hadn't experienced in years. It erupted from nowhere, and as it did, something else inside me loosened its grip. Something old. Sunny tilted her head, barked again, and then pounced on the shoelace as if it had wronged her. Later that day, we continued our rounds. I kept her in the van on a makeshift bed next to my seat. She was quiet for most of the journey, her ears perking up occasionally at passing palm trees or when a breeze caught her nose. Around noon, I stopped at the home of Mrs. Bell, an artist residing near the canyon. She came to the door in paint-splattered overalls and a straw hat, her hands still coated in cerulean blue. "Is that a German Shepherd puppy in your truck?" she inquired. "Yes, her name is Sunny." She ambled over, leaned on the van, and peered inside. "She reminds me of the dog my daughter had," she said softly. "Before the accident, that dog was always by her side, even at the hospital." Sunny nudged her nose toward Mrs. Bell's hand. The woman touched her with a gentleness that made my throat tighten. "She is no ordinary mixed breed," she observed. "Notice her posture, the way she observes you. She was clearly raised with care." I nodded, but the knot in my stomach intensified. Because if Sunny had been loved, if someone had raised her properly, why was she abandoned to die in a mailbox? Back at my apartment, I gave Sunny a bath in the kitchen sink. She didn't resist, just stood calmly and quietly, her eyes fixed on me the entire time, as if her trust in me surpassed my own self-trust. Afterward, she tore through the apartment, still damp, chasing her reflection in the metal trash can. When she skidded into the table leg and yelped in surprise, I dropped everything and rushed to her. She was unhurt, merely startled, but my hands were shaking. It was in that moment I understood that my attempt to keep an emotional distance had already failed. The emotional fortress I had constructed piece by piece over the years began to fracture the instant she rested her head on my knee under that pepper tree. That night, Sunny climbed onto my bed without an invitation. I allowed her to stay. I lay there in the darkness, a hand resting on her back, and contemplated all the unknowns. Where she originated, why she was given up, whether I possessed the strength to keep her, and the single question I could no longer suppress. What if her presence in my life was not fleeting? What if she was precisely the one I had been awaiting for so long? For 20 minutes, I stared at the email. "Hi, Lucas. We have an open kennel. If you're still looking to surrender the German Shepherd puppy, bring her in today between 3 to 6 p.m. No appointment needed." I had put her name on every waiting list in the county the day I found her. It felt like standard procedure. Do what's right. Let the professionals handle it. But now, with my phone in one hand and watching Sunny nap with her paws draped over her new stuffed squirrel, I felt a pang of regret the second I had clicked send. Leaning against the counter, I whispered, "I can't keep you, kid. I work 12-hour days. I have trouble finding time to feed myself." Sunny shifted slightly, emitted a small sigh, and drifted back to sleep. I loaded her into the van around 2:30 p.m. She was wearing the red collar I had bought her, the name tag swinging as if it had always been hers. For the whole trip, she sat pressed tightly against me, observing the road as if she were my co-pilot. When I paused at a red light, she rested her chin on my arm. At the shelter, the parking lot was sparsely filled. The building appeared clean, professional, and active. I remained in the van for a full minute. She looked up at me, not with fear or panic, but with a watchful, trusting gaze. "I'm doing the right thing," I told myself. I carried her toward the front entrance, each step feeling like I was wading through molasses. Inside, a woman stood behind the counter with a clipboard. "Name of the animal?" she inquired. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Sunny rested her chin on my forearm. "Are you here for the drop-off?" Her voice was kind, practiced. I nodded slowly. Yeah. Just." The woman pointed to a form on the counter. I glanced down. Name, age, found location, notes, and at the bottom, reason for surrender. I gazed at that line as if it could consume me entirely. I picked up the pen. Then I heard a sound I hadn't heard before. Sunny let out the quietest whine, almost inaudible, but it was enough to shatter something inside me. I looked at her. She wasn't restless. She wasn't trying to escape. She was simply waiting for me, to see if I would abandon her just as someone else had. I set the pen down. "I'm sorry," I told the woman. "I can't." She gave me a look I recognized, a blend of understanding and a trace of heartbreak. "It happens," she said softly. I walked out quickly, back to the van, back to the only thing that felt certain in that moment. I held Sunny against my chest in the parking lot for longer than necessary. My heart was pounding. My shirt was damp, but it didn't matter. "I lost one dog during the war," I murmured into her fur. I refused to lose this one to a form. Back in the van, she curled into the seat as if nothing had occurred, as if she already knew. And perhaps she did. Maybe that is what distinguishes a German Shepherd puppy. The way they seem to see through you, not just at you, as if they perceive the version of yourself you are still striving to be. I started the engine and drove away from the shelter. I had no idea how I would manage, but I knew one thing. If I were to keep her, I had to become someone who deserved to be her home. The next morning, everything felt changed. I was awake before my alarm, imbued with the kind of alertness that follows a profound internal shift. Sunny was curled into a compact ball at the end of the bed, one ear twitching periodically as if in a dream. I watched her for a moment before getting up to make coffee I didn't particularly want. It just seemed like something a person with a life and responsibilities would do. I had spent a large part of the night browsing online forums, reading vet reviews, and watching training videos. I compiled a list: vet checkup, vaccinations, registration, microchip. I had no idea how I would pay for it all, but that didn't matter. It needed to be done. That afternoon, we returned to the pet supply store. This time, my purchases were not just items. I was constructing a home. A proper food bowl, a water fountain, training pads, toys, treats, a crate, and a plush bed she would likely disregard. I even bought one of those silly squeaky ducks. When I returned, I rearranged my studio apartment as if I were designing a nursery. I cleared a corner by the window, put down a rug, and set up her bowls. I retrieved an old fan from storage and put it on a timer to keep her cool during my absence. It wasn't extravagant, but it was her space. She inspected it all like a monarch surveying her kingdom, sniffing every corner, sampling each chew toy, and dragging the squeaky duck to the center of the room, where she sat beside it like a trophy. We took our first short walk that evening. She was hesitant at the door, as if uncertain the world wouldn't consume her again. But when I spoke her name, she came, her tail low but wagging. I kept the leash slack, allowing her time. Every small thing, passing cars, barking dogs, the wind rustling the cactus shrubs, gave her pause. Yet she didn't back away. She remained by my side. At one point, she stopped entirely, looked up, and met my gaze. I am certain it was a silent thank you. That night, as I was responding to work emails, she brought me a present, a sock. A single, lightly chewed, incredibly proud-looking sock. She placed it at my feet, then sat and gazed at me as if to say, "This is my most prized possession, and I want it to be yours." I laughed so hard I almost spilled my coffee. Later, when I climbed into bed, she jumped up without an invitation and curled into the bend of my legs. Her breathing became even, as did mine. I stared at the ceiling and whispered. I never realized a man could be pieced back together simply by a dog sleeping nearby. She didn't stir, but I somehow felt she concurred. It occurred on a Tuesday. I had pulled up to the Martinez Ranch to deliver a small package containing supplements and grooming balm for their horses. The property was situated on the edge of a dry gulch, enclosed by weathered fences and tall eucalyptus trees. As always, Sunny was with me. By now, she occupied the passenger seat as if she co-owned the route. Mrs. Martinez came out, holding a crying toddler, her grandson Mateo. Her face was ashen. "Lucas," she called out, her voice filled with panic. "Have you seen him?" "Who?" "Javi, my other grandson. He was playing near the stable." I turned my back, and he was just gone. I surveyed the dry, cracked landscape. There were no hiding places, only dust, scrub, and an old stone well about 30 yards beyond the barn. Then I felt it. Sunny tensed beside me, her ears erect, her nose testing the air. "Go," I whispered. "Find him." I hadn't formally trained her, but an instinct, primal and genuine, took over. She shot across the field, kicking up sand, zigzagging past fence posts, as if she had run this very path in a past life. Mrs. Martinez cried out and ran after her. I was right behind them. Sunny skidded to a halt next to the well, her bark sharp, insistent, high-pitched, and rhythmic, a language dogs reserve for when the situation is dire. I reached her moments later and heard it, the faintest whimper. Peering over the edge, I saw Javi, no older than 4, huddled at the bottom of the dry well, his eyes wide with fear and his clothes caked in dust. He must have fallen through the deteriorated boards at the rim. I dropped to my knees and called down to him. He was frightened but uninjured. We were able to lower a rope and carefully pull him up, with Mrs. Martinez sobbing throughout the ordeal. When she finally held him, she looked at me through her tears and whispered, "Your dog just saved my grandson's life." I looked at Sunny, still panting, her her nose smudged with dirt, her tail thumping weakly. "She is not merely my dog," I replied softly. "She represents my second chance." Mrs. Martinez said nothing more, just embraced Javi tighter and knelt to kiss Sunny's head. Later that night, after a long bath and 2 extra treats, Sunny lay beside me on the floor, on her back, her paws twitching as she slept. I watched her and thought of Mara again, of the explosion, the wait, the goodbye I never had the chance to say. And I understood something. Perhaps I was never meant to save Sunny. Perhaps she was sent to save me once more. That postcard had been on my fridge for weeks, its edges curled, and the ink further faded by the dry desert air that seeped through my screen door each night. "I hope she finds peace." The hurried, unsteady handwriting troubled me more than I was willing to acknowledge. I took it down one night after Sunny had fallen asleep, being careful not to disturb her. Holding it under the kitchen light, I examined the smudged script and minuscule flecks of something dark, perhaps ash, or maybe dirt. There was no return address. But on the back, near the bottom, I saw something I hadn't seen before, a parcel stamp, with a barely decipherable number from a mail route. I accessed an old delivery log from the week I had found Sunny and cross-referenced times and zones. A single match emerged, a rental property in Desert Cove Estates, a deteriorating cluster of vacation homes clinging to existence. I had delivered garden fertilizer there that very morning. The gate was still secured with a padlock when I got there, but the mailbox at the entrance had the same design, the same rust patterns as the one where I'd found Sunny. I knocked on the door of the estate management office. A woman in her 60s, with weary eyes and an excess of perfume, answered. "Sorry to trouble you. Do you happen to know who was in Unit 4C about 2 weeks ago?" I asked. She frowned. "Just for a day?" A young woman, didn't provide a name. "Paid cash. Drove a dusty old Toyota with a baby seat in the back. But I never saw a child." My heart sank. "Did she have a dog?" Her expression twitched. "No, but she did ask about nearby vets. Said she'd found something. Then she left early, didn't even stay the night." I left my number, asking her to call if the woman ever returned. She promised she would, but I didn't believe her. Back home, Sunny greeted me with a bark, her tail whipping like a flag in a gale. She had dragged every sock from my drawer to the middle of the floor. I sat down next to her and showed her the postcard. "Was it love?" I whispered. "Or was it fear?" She looked at me, then did something she had never done before. She placed her paw tenderly on my hand, her gaze soft and serene, as though telling me, "The past is irrelevant. I am with you now." And perhaps that was the truth. But somewhere deep inside, a fire had been kindled. It was not a fire of anger, but of a deep-seated need to understand, to give her back the story she had lost. Because no German Shepherd puppy should start their life inside a metal box with a farewell stamped in ink. And if I didn't carry that story, who else would? The wind arrived with force that afternoon. Desert storms are not gentle visitors. They barrel into the valley with the force of a freight train, fast, loud, and thick with dust. I was in the middle of my route when the first gust struck, sending a paper bag tumbling past the van and slamming the door shut behind me. Sunny barked once from the passenger seat, her ears sharp, her eyes on the sky. I was about to pull over to wait it out when I saw that the leash hook inside the van was empty. "Sunny." "Nothing." I turned, my heart already hammering. The passenger door was ajar, just slightly. I had failed to close it properly. She had vanished. I leaped out into the wind, shouting her name repeatedly. The dust swallowed my voice. Visibility plummeted. I ran through the streets, up driveways, and around buildings, searching every shadow. There were no paw prints, no bark. Panic constricted my throat like smoke. The memory surged back in an instant, Mara's final moments. The heat, the noise, the ensuing silence. I had lost her in a flash. And now, no, not again. I drove like a man possessed, circling the block, yelling her name until my throat was raw. I called Mrs. Halbert. I called Mrs. Bell. No one had seen her. Then something came to mind. That old road, the mailbox. I spun the wheel and drove there, tires screeching at every turn. The storm continued to rage, bending palm trees like frail old men. My hands clenched the wheel so tightly they ached. Upon reaching the line of corroded mailboxes, I spotted her. She was sitting motionlessly and silently, directly before the exact box where our story began. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't whining. She just sat there, covered in sand and battered by the wind, her eyes fixed on the box as if it still held answers she was seeking. I jumped out and ran to her, collapsing to my knees on the gravel. I wrapped my arms around her so firmly she let out a small yelp, but she didn't resist. She leaned into me, tucking her head under my chin, her body shaking. "What were you doing?" I whispered. "Why would you come back here?" She didn't reply, of course, but her eyes did, and I understood she hadn't returned out of fear. She had returned to the place where someone had given up on her. But this time, she had waited for someone else, for me. I carried her to the van, my shirt soaked and my eyes stinging, laid her on the seat, and covered her with a blanket. She rested her head on my leg for the entire drive home, never moving, her gaze steady. And I knew with absolute certainty, she had not returned to relive her pain. She had come back to create a new narrative. I didn't sleep that night. Sunny was curled at my feet once more, her breathing even. But something in the way she stared into the darkness was unsettling, as if she were guarding a memory I couldn't access, a memory that lingered in the rusted corners of that mailbox. The morning arrived slowly, feeling heavy. The sky over Palm Desert was calm again, but within me, a tempest brewed. That storm had dislodged something. In her, in me, in both of us. I made a choice. We drove directly to the vet clinic off Highway 111, the one with the faded blue paw print on its sign. I had no appointment. I walked in holding Sunny and declared, "She needs to be chipped, vaccinated, registered, everything." The receptionist blinked. "Do you have ownership paperwork?" "No," I answered, "but she has me." They took her in immediately. She didn't make a sound. Not when they scanned her, not during the injections, not even when they cleaned the raw patch on her back leg, which must have chafed against the metal in that box for hours. "She's lucky," the vet remarked, reviewing her vitals. German Shepherd puppies typically don't last long in that kind of heat. She must be stubborn. I let out a quiet laugh. Yeah, she's stubborn. By noon, we were back at my apartment, but I kept moving. I opened my laptop, logged into an old blog I hadn't updated since before my service, and began to create a page. Desert Dogs, I titled it. "This is Sunny," I wrote. "She survived a mailbox in 120-degree heat. She didn't give up, so now I won't either." I shared her story, the postcard, the eyes that waited, the way she had brought me back to life. I wasn't expecting much, but within hours, messages began to arrive. People had seen dogs tied to fences, left in dumpsters. One woman discovered a litter in a storage unit. Another told me her daughter had followed a limping puppy home from school. "I don't know who to call," they all said. "There's no space. No one is answering. What should I do?" I told them, "Bring water. Bring shade. Stay with them. Don't look away." I created a map of shade stations, locations with water bowls and supplies. I posted lists of necessary items. I offered to deliver what I could, and I used her picture. Sunny sitting proudly in the passenger seat, one ear flopped over, her eyes on the horizon as if she had seen everything and was still choosing to hope. That night, holding the chipped registration paper in one hand and the postcard in the other, I whispered, "I believed I was the one who saved you." Sunny lifted her head and blinked. "But in truth, you salvaged the part of me I had long considered gone." These days, Sunny accompanies me everywhere. The van has transformed from a simple delivery truck into a mobile rescue unit, a traveling sanctuary stocked with blankets, bottled water, spare collars, and bags of kibble in the back. She is now familiar with every part of Palm Desert. When we pass locations where we've offered help, alleys, bus stops, the dusty shoulders of forgotten roads, she perks up as if she remembers. And the dogs, they seem to remember her as well. There's Luna, the stray we found near the gas station, who is now with a retired school teacher. There's Max, the frightened mutt from the canal, who now commands a backyard like he owns it. I'm not sure if Sunny grasps how much she has changed, or how much she is changing the world around her. But I do. People recognize her wherever we go. At the farmer's market, someone whispered, "That's the puppy from the mailbox story." A little girl ran up, wrapped her arms around Sunny, and exclaimed, "You're famous." Sunny just licked her cheek and sat down like royalty. Children wave from school buses. Neighbors leave treats on our doorstep. Some days we discover donations on the porch, bags of dog food, gently used beds, and even handwritten notes. But what truly matters is the way Sunny looks at me. Every morning, As I lace my boots and grab the van keys, she's already by the door, tail wagging, her eyes filled with something I thought I had lost forever: belief. Not just in me, but in life itself. She now sleeps curled at the foot of my bed, her head resting on a sock she refuses to give up. At night, I watch her breathe and contemplate how close I came to never knowing her, to never feeling this steady, quiet love, to never being reminded of the man I still wanted to become. Yesterday, I found her sitting by the mailbox again. Not the rusted one from before, but the clean white one outside my building. This time, she wasn't waiting. She was remembering. I sat down beside her, my arm resting on her back, and whispered, "I will never know who placed you in that box." She gazed up at me, her blinks unhurried. But I am grateful, because their farewell was my new start. This small puppy's path from being deserted to finding restoration illustrates the immense power of a second chance. I once believed I was merely delivering packages, that my life story was already written, that my best days were behind me. But then I discovered a German Shepherd puppy sealed inside a mailbox in the middle of the desert, with eyes that didn't plead or panic, but simply waited. And in her waiting, she gave me something I didn't realize I still needed: a purpose. Caring for a rescued puppy is about more than love. It's about responsibility. It's about pet care. It's about waking up each day and choosing to be a better person, not just for them, but because of them. Sunny showed me that healing doesn't always arrive in grand, dramatic moments. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the form of a paw on your knee, a tail thumping against the van seat, or a sleepy sigh at the foot of your bed. When we make the choice to provide care, we are not only rescuing animals, we are also salvaging pieces of our own humanity. Perhaps when people hear her story, they will look differently at sheltered dogs, the lost, and the forgotten. Maybe they will pull their van over, open a box, and alter a life, because it is a necessary act of compassion.